Good evening, everyone. Welcome to OCADU University. My name is Vlad Spikanovic. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Art, and on behalf of the OCADU, I'm delighted to welcome you all here tonight, and particularly our distinguished guest, Michael Landy. So welcome again to Toronto and OCADU University, the Canada's University of Imagination. OCADU University acknowledges the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we live, work, and create. So welcome to all of you. I'm delighted to see again the collaboration between the power plant and OCADU in any shape and form. It's always welcomed here, and we're delighted to do this again. I would like to thank Gaetan Verna for bringing this project to my attention and establishing that initial connection to OCADU, so another way to find a collaboration. As well to Josh Human, Curator of Education and Public Programs, for reaching out to me as well, and Nabila Abdelnabi as well, so Tim Chandler. You guys are an amazing team at the power plant, and we love collaborating with you. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Josh Human, Curator of Education and Public Programs, who will say a few words about the project. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vlad. Good evening, everyone. We are simply delighted to be partnering with OCADU on tonight's talk. Very special thanks to Dr. Sarah Diamond, to Dr. Vlad Spikanovic, to Mr. Alan Sims and their colleagues, for partnering with the power plant to present this talk tonight. We appreciate your hospitality, and we look forward to future possibilities. This entire project would not be possible without the commitment of our international art partner, the British Council. Maria Afzal, Country Director of the British Council Canada, and her colleagues connect people with learning opportunities and creative ideas from the UK. Their work includes numerous arts programs in Canada, from coast to coast. We are grateful for their steadfast involvement with the power plant's project and with Michael Landy, so thank you to them. We also extend sincere thanks to our institutional supporters from government agencies and corporations. But at this point, I'll pass the baton to my colleague, Nabila Abdelnabi, our new Assistant Curator.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have been fortunate enough to work directly with Michael Landy on preparations for this thought-provoking exhibition. So first, thank you to Michael Landy for being here with us for an extended period of time to produce demonstration, and to the lovely team of drawing assistants who are working with him. The exhibition opens on Thursday, September 28th, and will continue to evolve through mid-May 2018. A key member of a generation of groundbreaking artists that emerged in London in the 1990s, Michael Landy has garnered recognition for his versatile and idiosyncratic practice, which explores notions of capitalism, commerce, value, creation, and destruction. He has held exhibitions at numerous institutions around the world, and I'm going to let Michael speak more in depth about his project for the power plant, which is the third edition of our Fleck Clerestory commissioning program. But first, a few thoughts. Demonstration. The word, the gesture, is a call to action. It is of the now. When thinking about where we are in time, and against the backdrop of Canada 150, Michael is creating a space for the narratives, histories, and urgencies of the people who comprise the social fabric of this landscape. This is a time to reflect upon and discuss our present, but also to consider our history and our shared future. The work calls out for your participation, and so Michael and the power plant have put out an open call to the public to submit images, words, texts, and slogans that capture your perspective on Canada's social and political landscape. What gives you hope or causes you concern? What issues do you want to champion or challenge? We ask that you please send your materials to submissions@thepowerplant.org or by using the hashtag TPP demonstration on social media, and I really encourage you all to submit material. And now, please join me in giving Michael Landy a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Nabila. I don't know what else to add about. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive as far as demonstration is concerned. I mean, as Nabila mentioned, we will be kind of building this wall. Donald Trump talks about building a wall, and so I like the idea of we're going to build a wall of protest in the celestry space, thank you, over the next 6 months, and obviously, as far as the submission's concerned, at the end of the exhibition, then, because I like the idea of exchange, then you also get the artwork back. So that's part of the process of the work, that people send in the submissions, and if they're accepted, then you actually get the actual artwork back. So it's a kind of exchange, and I mean that's kind of one of the things that kind of preoccupies my work: exchange, worth, value, what we give to, whether it's people or objects or a weed or a human being. And I think this is probably what this is market, and I made this over a 2-year period back in 1990, between 88 and 90. I left Goldsmiths Art College in 1988. And as someone already mentioned, Josh mentioned about, I went to, I was termed a YBA back in the 1990s, but the idea, I think, at that point of time was we would, as a group, we would kind of make work together. I'd help people make some of their work. We'd also create an environment to show our work. So this is an old Nabrisco factory in South London, and it's an old biscuit factory, and we would convert the space, do it up, paint the walls. So it's a kind of, for a short period of time, I guess we were some kind of collective, and this is the last exhibition in this particular space. They'd had 2 other exhibitions called Modern Medicine and Gambler, and they were kind of like group shows of various contemporaries of mine, and so this is the first kind of large-scale piece of work any of my contemporaries did. And this is a market. So a market is a totality in a sense, and a market is its various parts. So I have crates that basically, a crate is designed to stack on top. So everything I did at that point of time, I was kind of interested in a kind of the material reality of the world, and so I kind of mimicked that. But the actual things, they're not ready-made as such. They're more like copies of market stalls, and I liked the idea that it was like a homage to a kind of market that would appear one day and is kind of gone the next. So it's a kind of very fluid, even though it doesn't feel like it, kind of fluid materiality about it. So the steel armatures themselves, they're all kind of just painted in red oxide, and they all just, you can piece them together very quickly, and then also you can take them apart. Everything's just kind of laid together. The shuttering ply is just laid on the armatures, and then there's the kind of display grass. And I liked just the idea of there's nothing on, I mean, apart from the actual thing, the display podiums, that's the only thing that's actually on display, is the actual podiums themselves. So people would obviously walk in, and everywhere looked the same in a sense. There was no hierarchy in the space, and everything was on a very human level. Like the crates were just turned upside down, and so waiting for something to happen to them. As far as the display is concerned. So I liked the idea of the exchange as an idea of real goods passing hands between real people, as opposed to another kind of market, a more global, sightless market. And I guess it was my kind of homage to those kind of once a week markets that are not here one moment and gone the next. So everything, in a sense, the market stalls could also revert into kind of work pieces, and then the actual crates themselves were Allied Bakery crates. It says the sole property of Allied Bakeries will prosecute for the retention or unauthorized use of this crate. So literally people driving around prosecuting people for appropriating their crates. But I liked the idea that they also obviously mimicked minimalism as well. And this is so everything was kind of broken down into, this was an appropriation piece, this is a collect piece, this is a work piece which literally just leant up against a wall, and which also could become a market stall as well. And that's a stack piece. And then I had like 3 videos and of people just kind of creating their kind of these kind of podiums outside their shops. So it's kind of bringing the world into the space with snippets of conversation and yeah. So that was, I mean, that's like literally, yeah, it's probably, yeah, it preoccupied me for about 2 years, the whole thing. I mean, I showed the work, parts of it separately in various group exhibitions, but I mean, I was interested in showing it as one whole thing. And so people were slightly perplexed about it because, as I said, there was no real hierarchy and everything's very humdrum. It's just kind of the kind of stuff that one would see in the street, really. And this is closing down sale. So this is kind of skip a couple of years, and half of London looked like it was closing down. This was there was a real recession on, like the interest rates were like 12%, people were losing their homes, things, a kind of sale is a kind of, one thing's had one price one moment and another price the next, so value in a sense is always fluctuating. So this is my first gallery I ever had. It was Carsten Schubert Limited. And that's would be where his name would be. But I put a big kind of tarpaulin saying closing down sale. And so, it's a shop, and people would, like the workers, it's like Charlotte Street in London, would look in the window, and they'd normally like pass comment on the kind of funny looking contemporary art that was there. And of course then they were saying, oh, what a shame that the gallery had shut down, and there was this kind of slightly garish looking exhibit, kind of sale. But so it's like London 1992, and inside I kind of stolen all these shopping trolleys and filled it with junk that I'd collected from various places, and like basic stuff that people had thrown out and was defunct and wasn't working anymore, and then I'd kind of just completely cover them in price stickers, and this was kind of on 2 floors, and I had an audio tape, and I would literally speak to the public, and it said a bit, I only remember extracts, I can't remember the whole thing, but it was like, step inside, have a look round please, everything must go, everything's been reduced, and everything's at a fraction of the normal shop and store prices. Don't be shy. I was shy when I was a little girl, but look at me now, ladies and gentlemen. Too late will be the cry, the bargains you have wanted passed you by. Come inside, have a look round, please. Everything must go. Everything's been reduced, and everything's at a fraction of normal shop and store prices. A lady came up to me a moment ago. She said to me, young man, how can you sell it so cheaply? I said, it's very simple, you see. I said, it's a massive sale. It's a monster sale. It's a £100,000 clearance sale. It will not be repeated, and it will never be seen again. So step inside, do yourselves a favour, and everyone will get a bargain here today. Bargains, bargains, bargains. They will not be repeated, and it will never be seen again. So come inside and have a look around, please. Crazy, 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 crazy. So that was kind of like constant in people's ears. And then the gallery, they told me afterwards that when I was in the gallery, they would have it on. As soon as I left, they'd switch it off, the gallery staff, because it drove them round the bend. So people, I mean, it wasn't a very successful, so I didn't sell anything, but people obviously, but people would rummage in the shopping trolleys, and the British love a bargain, and so it was that kind of, so that's a kind of another idea of value, and just kind of basically all this stuff that people had acquired at one point was unloved, and they threw it out, and then I just kind of re-represented it, so show it back to them again, but like just festoon it for sale signs, and that's one of the. Actually, no, that's a shopping trolley I recreated, yeah, for old time's sake, no. But, yeah. So that's 1992, and these are just some of the details. I mean, people love to shop. People like to rummage around and look for bargains, like I said. This is kind of 1994. I was no longer with Carson Schubert by that point, surprisingly enough. And this is Scrap Heap Services, so that's me as a young British artist. And I created this like fictitious cleaning company, or as it said at the time, to get rid of people who no longer played a useful role in life. And so I kind of created this, I created a video, I had like mannequins and a kind of whole installation. And I began with just collecting rubbish and making these little cut-out figures out of rubbish. And I literally made thousands of them, and so all my projects on the whole, there's a kind of duration, especially the early ones, like duration of 3 to 4. Market was a couple of years. Probably Scrap Heap Services was probably about 3 or 4 years in the making. And I literally, I just made all these kind of little figures out, that literally would get swept up in the video, and then they would end up in this machine, which I called the Vulture, which Vulture kind of lives on carrion, and the little figures would go in to the machine, and they would kind of get pulped, and they get like spat out the other end. They're like wood chipper shredders, big wood chipper shredder. And the heat was the idea of a loss of human potential, because at the same time in Britain at that time, I left school in 1979, and that's when Margaret Thatcher came to power, and so like the changing from a kind of more manufacturing base to a more service-led industry caused a lot of upheavals. A lot of the Brexit thing was because we basically shut down bits of our manufacturing past, and we never gave people jobs, and so they kind of laid in wait for about 30 years to vote for Brexit. So that was part of the idea, was like the idea of creating this heap and the kind of loss of human potential. And at the same time, I was unemployed, and I kind of created my own kind of cottage industry for myself. And that's so I kind of, these were kind of additions, and that's partly how I financed the whole project. And that's actually at the Tate Gallery. So eventually, I showed it in Minneapolis in an exhibition called Brilliant back in 95 or 96, along with fellow young British artists. And then eventually I showed it in Leeds and in London. And eventually the Tate acquired it. So, this is kind of like a precursor to Breakdown. It's probably the exhibition I'm best known for. And this is Michael Landy at home. And I created, I was at home one day, and I was in the kitchen, I was staring at a piece of A4 paper, and then suddenly it popped into my head that I would destroy all my worldly belongings. And I think it's the first time I was like materially ahead in my life, and then I thought, what does that mean, and what? And obviously then I thought, well, I'm just going to destroy everything. And this is an exhibition where I used to live, and these crates are milk crates, and it says the sole property of Michael Landy, who will prosecute for the retention or unauthorized use of this crate. And so I created like walls out of these milk crates, and then I put these drawings. All these are like black and white drawings, all pen and ink drawings of various ways I could go about destroying all my worldly belongings. And it was because I didn't have a gallery, then I had to kind of open some kind of channel of communication between. It's okay having ideas, but you have to somehow create some kind of communication channel between you and the outside world. So, I opened up the doors to this is like a live-work space. The bedroom was just behind those blue crates, and then I would be, you can't see me, but I'm kind of in the back there creating this big collage, like sticking bits and pieces together. So it was open to the public, and people would come in, and I'd talk about what I wanted to do, and try to get some kind of interest going, and that's one of my crates. And that's the consuming paradox. So eventually I had all this kind of information about recycling, and then it's obviously wrapped up with consumerism and also destruction as well. So I got into a conversation with Art Angel, who commissioned artists to make public artworks more or less in London, and James Lingwood, who's the director, and we opened a kind of avenue of conversation which I wasn't used to. Like with Scrap Heap Services, it was like the idea, make the idea, find a venue to show the idea. So I never really was very closed off in some respects. And Art Angel are all about having some kind of conversation, like we're going to have and from that I actually really benefited. Actually, I benefited in so many different ways, and you know, even though there are elements of my work which are performative, like even being present in my exhibition as people come and wander around Michael Landy at home. But this is a breakdown, and so this is eventually what materialized over a number of, I mean, that's Michael Landy at home is like 98, this is 2001, and we're kind of in Oxford Street in London, and it's like the place where people go to consume, where people go to shop. And this is the old CNA building, so it's an old CNA building. It's like a retail, it's Dutch, but it's but everyone remembers it from their childhood, from Britain, and there's like they did this whole thing, Man at CNA's, and so this is like we managed to convince CNAs who were moving out of Britain altogether to give us their space for must have been about 5 or 6 weeks. And I mean, it wouldn't have made sense if it had been anywhere else but Oxford Street, where literally people wander down the road, you know, looking Dixons at the latest DVDs, like, you know, they have like shopping bags full of stuff from Selfridges. So people go there to consume. They don't go there to see someone destroying all their worldly belongings in front of them. So consequently, at the same time as because this is, I based it on a material reclamation facility, and it's like 100 meters of conveyor belt. I had like 3 bays, electrical, I can't remember them all, but I had a car bay, obviously, and F for furniture. So we broke everything down into, it was very organized as far as if one's going to destroy all one's worldly belongings. It was very organized, everything had a number, and everything was weighed and given a name. And that's what the little yellow trays are with, like, various things. So at the age of 37, I started to destroy my worldly belongings in front of complete strangers on the whole. So about 50,000 people came to see it over a 2-week period, I guess. And so it's not an art gallery as such. It's like big, you know, people would go in. They weren't quite sure what would happen when they first got there, and maybe they would pick up the little yellow leaflet and maybe read about the project a bit. But what I found on the whole was British public were very open to it, because I thought I was going to get ridiculed. My mum and dad worked their whole lives to have stuff. You know, the more stuff we have, the more, in our Western side, more successful we're perceived to be. And I mean, people really approached it in a very open way. People would talk about their own thoughts about possession. And as an artist, the one thing you really want is for people to talk about your work. Because the worst thing is when it gets ignored, or, you know, and so, I mean, and at the same time, I knew it would be the thing I would be known best for as well. So, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I talked about it as, you know, consumer has been the #1 ideal of our time. And as a child, I used to like taking things apart. I used to like taking cars apart and toys apart, because you want to know what's inside them. And this is kind of my grown-up version. You're literally taking things, constructed material things apart, and you're seeing what, you know, you're basically breaking it down into its material parts. You're breaking it down to where it came from. So, you know, I literally catalogued all my worldly belongings. I had C for clothing, R was for reading, MV was for my Saab 900, which I had polished, and I had the bump knocked out of it, so it looked at its best as we kind of decided to take it all apart. I had my record collection. I had an age where we played vinyl, so I had we would play my record collection throughout the whole exhibition. So that was one of the last things we kind of destroyed, was my BMW speakers, my records, and my record player. And but yeah, so people really approached it in a really kind of open, on the whole. I mean, you know, people did obviously ridicule me as well, because obviously people saw it as a waste. I mean, I could have given it away, I could have done something with it, but that wasn't my interest. Was actually the experience. That's what I was really interested in. People own experience and my experience of being present whilst this was going on, because two things. I mean, it was my happiest 2 weeks of my life, and also like witnessing your own death as well, because then I had people turn up I hadn't seen for years, and then I thought, God, they'd only turn up if I was dead. So it had that kind of feeling about it as well. So everything kind of, the idea was that over the 2 weeks we would break everything down into its material parts, and then people could kind of witness it. I've got the videos somewhere. And that's Dave Nutt, past Dave. Dave Nutt was a Saab Buddhist mechanic who helped take my car apart. I gave him the job because he really knew about the ethos of Saab. And then at the end of the exhibition, he took parts of my Saab car and buried it under a sacred tree in India. And so everything was kind of labeled. L was for leisure, and then everything was broken down to its material parts. We had like procedural guidelines. I had like 10 operatives, maybe 10 operatives. Anyway, I can't quite recollect, but it would get broken down to material and then granulated and pulped. And at the beginning, because obviously something like this is a very expensive business, and we ran over budget, so we had this idea we were going to sell bits of it as, you know, I would sell someone my shredded passport, which is obviously the Queen's property anyway. You could get prosecuted for destroying your passport. I'm just warning you now. And then it would be shredded and go into a Perspex case, and you know, and someone would buy it, and that would like pay back the, you know, because we went over budget. But at the last minute, I decided that I couldn't do that. So I didn't end up with zero, which would have been very zen. I ended up in the red, which, so like, you know, I didn't end up with like nothing on the last day. I ended up with debts. But, yeah, which is kind of the welcome to the contemporary world, really. And so this is breakdown. So, forgot my thread, so alongside that, I also created an inventory of everything I own. So it came to 7,227 items, and I forgot I had A for artwork as well. So I destroyed artwork. It was obviously mostly my own artwork, but also I did also destroy friends' artwork as well, which I asked them whether that was okay with them at the time. And Gary Hume is a painter, and he told me it was fine, but at the last minute he said that could I, because he gave me a painting, I remember, for my birthday, and he said he'd like it back and he'd swap it for another one. And so he gave me that painting. I remember putting a blowtorch to it in front of a German film crew at the time. And then he came to the exhibition and he felt really bad because he obviously made up this cock and bull story that he wanted, you know, the thing back, and gave me another one. So he felt bad, so he actually gave me the original one to destroy as well. And this is the inventory, and this is like, I mean, it wasn't complete actually at the time of the actual 2-week performance, and so I made a complete list of everything I owned at the time at the age of 37. And of course, most of the time you just have stuff, you comes through your letterbox, you don't really think about it really, but I had to itemize everything I owned, like from my VCR to bits of molded plastic that fell off, something which also would be given an inventory number. So it was like, you know, from the car to, I don't know, just and we had P for perishable, like perishable things as well. So everything was kind of itemized, went into bags, and then we had this kind of spreadsheet, and it was very, you know, quite very bureaucratic. We had things stolen. I think most stuff was stolen at the private view, which says a lot about the art world. And then we had things get stolen, obviously, on Oxford Street anyway. So, so I remember once someone tried to steal my Chrysophilia print, but my friend Clive, who worked with me, grabbed the other end, and they got into a tug of war. And the guy said he doesn't want it anyway; he's going to destroy it. And that's just a sort of detail. I mean, obviously, a breakdown is obviously play on kind of psychological breakdown and a breakdown. And at the point, at the last day when I destroyed my dad's sheepskin coat and my record collection, then I was literally without anything apart from my blue boiler suit that Ars Angel gave me. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really, I mean, I was more interested in about, the artwork for me was the 2 weeks whilst I was there. It wasn't about what happened afterwards. Yeah. And then for about a year afterwards, I didn't make any work because it's such a final thing to do, to kind of do away with yourself in some respects, that creatively speaking, I found it very difficult to move forward, because it's destroying all your belongings in front of complete strangers, and obviously people make all sorts of kind of assessments about you. And I felt that was obviously an incredibly public thing to do that, so I kind of retreated into, and the reason I became an artist probably in the first place is because I enjoyed drawing as a child, and I think that's kind of what really brought me to art school. And I was actually really reluctant to actually study fine art at all, because I wanted to be a textile designer, but I loved repeated pattern. But my problem was that it was kind of ready-made repeat. It wasn't very commercial. So eventually I reluctantly became, because I couldn't do anything else. And this is a shepherd's purse, and this is like a weed that grows in little cracks, like, you know, little cracks in the street. And shepherd's purse is also called mother's heart. It has very distinctive shaped seed pods in the shape of a heart. And children used to play a game where they pick a seed pod, get the child to pick a seed pod, and of course the seeds would break into the palm of the child's hand, and they'd say, "Oh, look, you've broken your mother's heart." So I really, really liked the weeds, because a weed is a plant out of place. They, you know, at one moment it's in someone's garden being well tended, and then suddenly it will find its way out and find some soil and moisture and grow. And I really find them very stoical. I mean, they're called weeds, but they're actually really stoical things. They don't, you know, they're perennials or annuals. They just grow in the side of buildings. You know, you'll find, you know, they're very entrepreneurial. They'll find, you know, they'll find a bit, you know, they'll be in the bottom of your trainers, or in some mud in the side of the car tire, and they travel, they move. And so I really like, I mean, they're like, you know, I literally like dig out the weed with its root system and keeping its earth, and I'd have like, these are etchings, so it's like hard ground etching, and I'd kind of draw them like 1-to-1 scale, and so the kind of plant is, you know, you're trying to keep it alive as you're drawing, and it's kind of like it's throwing out its seeds. They've got wonderful names: Herb Robert, Dandelion, bristly ox tongue. So I drew a whole kind of season, like a whole year of different kinds of weeds. But mostly it was to kind of, because I really just like how stoical that they just find a little bit of, they grow on waste sites. You see them along train lines. They're just very entrepreneurial about finding bits of earth, and they don't need us. They're happy to kind of grow. That's annual Mercury. And so, yeah, so I'm drawing, the plants there, and I've just got this hard copper plate, and I've got an etching tool, and I'm trying to get down as much of the actual detail of the plant as it's slowly dying. This is my father. So I think I remember someone made a comment once that they found my art was hard to get into, and maybe I was like that very much as a person as well, in some respects, to have a conversation with me. And I remember my father's came over to Britain, into London, in late 1950s, and he's from Ireland, and he was a miner, a tunnel miner. So he built parts of the London Underground. He built sewers. He built, but always as immigrants do, they do the jobs that the people don't want to do. So they do all those kind of God-forsaken jobs that other people don't want to do. But anyway, he was in Northumberland creating a sewer, and one day the tunnel caved in on him, and he remembers looking up as he was being buried alive and looking at the roots of the trees above his head. But anyway, a young man came in who was working with and pulled him out. But by that time he had spinal injuries. He was in traction for about 6 months. But anyway, he could never. The one thing he wanted to be was a miner, and his physical disabilities wouldn't allow him to do that. So what's this really sort of kind of forerunner to is that the Tate asked me. They have this kind of thing called a Devine Commissions, and it's at Tate Britain, and it's this big long sculpture gallery, and it has the North Devine, the South Devine, and the Ottoman in the middle, and they asked me to do something there. And I remember going to visit my parents and wanting to somehow articulate what happened to my father in an artwork. And so that's what I set out to do. So I became artist in residence at my parents' house, 62 Kingswood Road, Goodmayes, Ilford, Essex, IG38UD. So I literally was there, and I didn't put a video camera on my father. It was just I remember him reminding about me as a child of drawing. So I just started to draw him, and that's kind of how it began. And then eventually, after about a year or so, and this is our house. That's why I mentioned the house, because my father, the only jobs he was left to do was jobs around the house, and by that time he became very infirm, and he wasn't even able to do the jobs around the house. So that how I rationalised it was the house, in a sense, becomes his body, because as he slowly starts to fall apart, so does the exterior and the interior of the house. That's my mum and dad, by the way. They weren't always outside the house, but this is I think it's the South Devines, and it's a kind of neoclassical sculpture gallery. And this is our family house. This is the front of it. Not literally, I didn't literally put it up, but it's like a one-to-one model of. My mum contributed the net curtains, and it just about fits. So I like the idea that my mum and dad bought this house knowing one day it would be in the Tate, because you could about walk around the side of it. And I split the house in two, because I had video projections. So you would be standing in, this is the front of the back of the house, and I kind of split the house in two. So I had the rear in the North Devines, and one could see these kind of video projections. I made this some motion control camera, and my father had this shelf in his bedroom, and it was like a self-portrait of him as a maker and doer. So he had all his tools and things on this shelf, and I just got this motion very close up and just kind of plotted this kind of. We went off about 60 minutes, the kind of very close up of the actual shelf, and that was my father's portrait of himself. So I began the project by I was talking about the NHS earlier on. So the NHS is literally from cradle to grave. So I started with just asking my father's permission whether I could look into our family history and read about our family history and our past, and through his medical records. And I mean, his accident happened when I was a child, so I only had a very sketchy kind of, I can only in a very sketchy way. So I think, I think that's partly kind of what informed the whole thing. And so, I mean, it's probably as much to do about me as ultimately in the end as it was to do with my father. But so I mean, I think that's what I was talking about earlier on when I first talked about value and worth. And my father got compensation; he was compensated for his injuries, but the only thing he really wanted to do was go back to work. Which I remember reading when he was in hospital, he had my dad was literally at the face tunnel, with kind of hydraulic spade that would be cutting into the earth. So I remember the nurse talking about my dad's muscles on his neck, and of course 20, 30 years later this man was kind of withered away. And and that's the colour. It's what I was talking about his shelf, but it's like a kind of collage of him really, and it's his kind of creation in a sense. And that's the other side. So my father was also a DIY fanatic, so he collected all these DIY magazines from like the 1950s up until the present. And I had my father like to whistle, because whistle while you work, and whilst he was doing, if he did any various jobs around the house. And so this is a bit, So I use the DIY images with, and then each note it changes. This is Jim Reeves. It's Welcome to My World. It's like an American singer from the 1950s. My dad liked a lot of country and western music. So that would be playing on the other side of the house. So how are we doing for time? Wow, 5 minutes left. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Anyway, so that's the rear of the house. My mum contributed the doily on the first floor. You can see her silhouetted in the window. My mum also contributed, like I said, the net curtains. And so, and people went to see the original house. That's the one thing I didn't think people would go and do. So it actually became a bit of a tourist attraction for a while. People would park up outside, knock on my mum and dad's door, and introduce themselves and have their pictures taken. This is periphery vascular. So, like I was saying, drawing about, for me, it's about detail and kind of looking into things. And this is my father's foot. That's my penis, but you don't really want to look at that. And that's a squashed moth. That's a dragonfly. So just like various things my father would have had on the shelf. This is John Tangley's Homage to New York. And I once, as a textile student, I walked into a Tate exhibition at Tate Britain, as we call it now. And I saw an exhibition of Jean Tangley's kinetic sculptures. And it was a complete revelation to me the way people were engaging in the sculpture. They put their foot on the foot pedal, and the sculpture would come alive. It was kind of made out of junk. But years later, after Breakdown, I became really interested in this work. It's called Homage to New York, and he created it at the Museum of Modern Art back in 1960. And it was a self-constructing, self-destroying artwork, which existed for 27 minutes, and like Breakdown, all the Breakdown in the end went to landfill, then most of Homage to New York also went to a New Jersey dump. So I just talk really loudly. And then I asked because I want to search, because at the end of the Homage to New York, the public come along, and there's radio extracts of them pulling bits of the sculpture and taking it away as souvenirs. So I tried to piece together this sculpture through the remnants, and I create a documentary. And that's the first time I came to Toronto, was because I make a documentary, because I want to recreate Homage to New York and trying to get copyright permission, and because I like the idea of recreating it for it only to obviously destroy itself all over again. And that's Suicide Carriage. That's a Suicide Carriage. That's the original fragment from Homage to New York. And the reason that exists, that's at the Museum of Modern Art collection, is because that was supposed to drown itself in Mayors River. Mayors was a contemporary of Rodin, but it was supposed to fall in the river, but knowing Tangley, most things don't do what you imagine, so it broke down, so it never actually drowned itself. And these are my fake remnants of Homage to New York. These are some drawings that I made, so I'm going to have to talk really fast. But that's me with, I lob off his head and put my head on his shoulders. And then I create, one day I was kind of daydreaming at the studio, I didn't know what to do, so I decided to draw myself. And so this is the first portrait I drew of myself. And I like looking in people's faces, so ultimately, in the end, I made, this is my whole family, and I drew my family, and then I moved on to my friends, and then I drew people in the art. So I must have made about 120 drawings, and I was like there in people's faces. So they would have to. It's like performance in a sense as well. They would spend 2 days looking at them and me looking at them, and just really very intense kind of period of time. I'll quickly move on. This is a project that I did for the British Museum called Medals of Dishonor, and there's some history of David Smith medals of they used it, worthless wars, and they asked some contemporary artists to make a medal, and so I decided to make a medal about, we have this thing called ASBO, it was antisocial behaviour order. Young people were given that when they do wrong. But what happened was that it became a medal of honour, so the kids turned it round into, obviously the more bad things you did, the more ASBOs you got, the more street cred you got. And so this is just a kind of medal of Dean Robotham and kind of the things that he did. So I got a medal, Dean got a medal, the British Museum got a medal. And this is Jean Tang, this is based on a Jean Tang, but this is what I was talking about. When after 1982, when I went to this exhibition, I came away, which obviously I consequently destroyed, one of his melodramatic drawings. It's like an abstract machine that makes abstract drawings, and came away with that and a catalogue. But anyway, so I decided to make my own it's called a credit card destroying machine, so I showed it at Freeze, and I asked people to, if they gave me their credit card to destroy, which is that's what that showing stuff on the floor is, they could get an abstract drawing. And this is Art Bin, so I'm going to go a bit quick. But talking about earlier on, touching on art when destroying artworks during breakdown, I mean, the idea of property law cropped up, and obviously artists' moral rights. And what happened in my country, in the UK, you can't show something deflammatory, you can't change its colour, but ironically, you can actually destroy an artwork. And so I asked artists, this is the South London Art Gallery, I created this 900 cubic metre bin, and there was a staircase that one could go up there as well. And I talked about, what did I talk about? I talked about, so my mind's gone blank. I talk about monument to failure, that's it. I talked about failure, all artists know, artists love their failures. Also, they're kind of why doesn't this work? And so I asked artists to contribute their failures, and one could literally go up these stairs and throw the bin in, throw your artwork in the bin. And so it took up the whole of the gallery. And obviously after things start to pierce, things start to shatter onto other things, and so one can start to sort of create some kind of narrative with it as well. So I had famous artists, unknown artists, students, Sunday painters. I mean, it was very much like a kind of submission thing, and it's George Bush, I think. But that's cast in my head. That's me as a rubbish bin, self-portrait of me as a rubbish bin. That's a bronze bin. Shall I stop there, or shall I carry on for a while longer? Okay. And this is my project Acts of Kindness, and this was on the London Tube network. And I was sitting up on the tube one day, And I looked up and someone offered their seat to somebody or something, and I kind of thought, what was that about? And so I started to think about kindness and why would you do that for a complete stranger? Like, as obviously we talk about what we have to offer economically as individuals, but also we also have our humanity and our kindness. And obviously London Underground, people say London's very, people aren't very friendly, but then you start to notice these kind of things happening, and I asked a travelling public. This is one of the posters. It's like an Art on the Underground project to send in their everyday acts of kindness. So it wasn't like heroic acts of kindness. It was just like everyday acts of kindness. It's like one story where a lady's very depressed, and there's a chap opposite her, and he kind of notices that, so he makes this little origami horse, and he drops it on her lap as he's alighting the train, because obviously in London no one makes eye contact with each other, so we don't want any. And so, and then she realised that she's no longer alone, and so it's that kind of connection, in a sense, that kind of connection between self and other, and that kind of emotional bridge that can be formed, and that can also have disastrous consequences as well. But quite a lot of time people would, they would talk about, they would like be crying on the tube, they've lost their job, they've fallen out with their partner or whatever, and then someone will give them a hanky or some kind words or a hug, and I think that is an idea that I had during breakdown, actually. So it was just I had to find a way of try to articulate it, and it came in the forms of like self and other, and then using the kind of the stations as a kind of connection point between. And then then I was asked, whilst I was destroying things during at the South London Art Gallery, I got a phone call and they asked me, did I want to become artist residence at the National Gallery? And the National Gallery is like 99.9% painting. I never really went there as a student. It didn't really, and this is Chima, and it was like residency I was there for about 2.5 years, and the simple thing they ask you to do is somehow reflect the collection. They don't, that's all, and you get a studio in the gallery, and then I spent like a long time, because I thought I'd better get to know the collection, so I spent a long time just looking at the collection, and I was drawn to kind of Christian iconography, and the Renaissance period, and I'm Catholic, I guess my parents are Irish Catholic, I guess I was brought up with kind of Christian iconography, and so I started to become very interested in that. This is Chima, this is Doubting Thomas, and Doubting Thomas is sticking his finger into the side of Christ, Eventually, I came up with the idea, like I was talking about the Tangly, about you put your foot on the foot pedal and making this thing come alive. I had this exhibition called Saints Alive, where I used different fragments of paintings and create these kinetic sculptures. There's a book called The Golden Legend, which talks about the legend of saints. So this is my version of the Chima. You put your foot on the foot pedal, and that finger starts to poke on the chest. So the chest is essentially kind of like a boxing bag, and the thing, this is at the National Gallery, so bits are breaking down, bits are falling off, and they didn't quite know what to. I mean, at one point they had to say, they closed the whole thing down before it even began. But and this is the kind of the result of the residency. This is St. Jerome. St. Jerome. It's also a Chima as well, but I use just the base so like take different parts of saints, and like weeds also have their own attributes. That's how you tell one from another, and so saints are also very similar to that. So you always know who St. Jerome is because he has a rock in his hand and he has a six-pack, and he beats his chest because he's also a doctor. Sometimes you'll see him in red robes. He'll beat his chest. Like he'll bloody his chest because he has sexual thoughts, so obviously he has to beat himself to take his mind off the dancing girls of Rome in his case. And this is my St. Jerome, but it's like fragments taken from 3 different paintings. This is St. Francis. He hits himself on the head with a crucifix when he put the money into the donation box. This is St. Apollonia. She's a Virgin Martyr. It's based on the Lucas kind of the older painting, and her attribute is a tooth and a pair of pliers, because when they torture her, they pull out her teeth, and so you always tell who Saint Apollonia is, because there's only like a couple actually in the collection, and normally like some Roman emperor falls in love with a Christian virgin, and she tells him to go away, and ultimately it leads to her death. But this is Saint Michael. This is a cup based on the Carlo Crivelli painting. Saint Michael is also the slayer of the devil, and he's also the weigher of souls. So when and he's also an archangel as well. And this is my version, so you can still see the boots standing on the devil, and he's also weighing the souls. And then I've got Peace and Martyr at the top, and that's St. Lawrence. The griddle is actually St. Lawrence, because when they torture St. Lawrence, they put him on a hot griddle, and he enjoys himself on it. He says, "Turn it up a bit." So I made some collages as well of different aspects of the collection. This is St. Francis, and St. Francis gives up all his worldly belongings. Like, he comes from a very affluent family, and he gives up all his worldly belongings to like he's literally naked. And obviously he creates a Franciscan religious order, and the knots on the actual robe depict the actual But he has a stigmata, so only him and Christ have a stigmata, and the chap up there is a serif, and so you always can tell who St. Francis is, because he has the stigmata. But I make St. Francis, I obviously chop his head off, and I put T-shirts, poverty, chastity, because that's what I was trying to remember what the knots signify, and I had this kind of, you could operate it where the crane goes into St. Francis, and you might win a T-shirt. That's all the stigmatas in the collection, and that's St. Stephen. So I also had an exhibition in Mexico, because I come from a circular society. To an extent, we've given up on faith. But in Mexico, Catholicism is still, saints are still really alive. They have saints for drug dealers, they have saints for all sorts of things, and saints are really. So this is this is St. Stephen. This is also from a Carlo Crivelli painting, and you can stone St. Stephen was one of the first Christian martyrs, and he gets obviously stoned to death. So I like the idea, people would throw rocks at St. Stephen's head, and slowly, And that's the whole exhibition. Also, there was St. Catherine. There's the St. Catherine wheel, which, St. Catherine was also another virgin martyr. She meets her death by having her head chopped off, and milk flows from her body, and she's taken up to Mount Sinai for burial by like 1,000 angels. And these are drawings. These are all the St. Catherine wheels in the National Gallery collection. It's all 37 of them. And then there's this particular project, which began, I called it Breaking News, and I had an exhibition in my studio, and so I obviously created all the content, and I created all the drawings as well, and I was a big David Bowie fan. And so this kind of tracks back to what I was talking about Margaret Thatcher. I have Thatcher, she's holding up the sign saying let the rich get richer, which I don't think a politician would ever say now, but that was kind of the idea of kind of trickle down economics. I'm old enough now, I'm no longer a YBA, I'm a Royal Academician, which is academic, and there's only 50 at any one point in time, and when one dies, you get this letter through the post to say blah, 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 has died, and, then they have an election to elect another one. But the meetings were so boring, I pretended that I was dead. Continue. This is my exhibition in Basel. So this is just some of the material I was talking about. And this is my most recent exhibition at the Apollonia School in Athens, where over the last 10 years there's been Greece is bankrupt basically, and it's been held up by EU funds, but for those EU funds, they have to, cut their pensions. There's been a lot of public sector job losses, and so people are really suffering. So there's another organisation called Neon, and they're similar to Art Angel, where they're Greek, but public art projects in Athens and in Greece generally. So my idea was to have a kind of direct conversation with the Greek public where they could send in their thoughts and feelings about Athens and Greece at present, and it could be the past as well, and we would create the drawings and they would appear on the 4th floor of this dilapidated school. And so I also had like a drawing workshop, but this was like open to the public, so people could actually see the drawings being made as well as the actual artwork, and very much like the demonstration idea that you could also, we would create the artwork and then you would get the artwork at the end of the exhibition as well. So people came and collected the works, and that exhibition finished on the 12th of July. So there's a lot of graffiti in Greece, and most obviously, predominantly, the whole exhibition was in Greek. So all my assistants would show me, tell me like wordplay and what things meant, and so we dealt with quite a lot of historical things as well. And I was saying the other day that I had a whole room of no's as well. And so, because the blue and white is like the Greek flag, and obviously the red and white is partly because it's Canadian flag, but it's also like warning signs as well as blue and white's like mandatory signs. Yeah, sorry. That's.
So if anybody has questions, just raise your hand and we can come to you and you can ask Michael.
Hello. I'm curious about what the first thing you bought after you destroyed all your things.
Well, I was actually given a Paul Weller CD almost like moments after destroying my worldly belongings. I didn't have a CD player to play it on, but someone gave me. One of the people who worked on the project decided it was and I couldn't say no because it felt, but first probably a toothbrush or something. But yeah, I mean but I didn't pretend in like Western society you can't. Consumerism is inescapable. If I wanted to carry on living in the country, otherwise you go on an island or something, try and get away from it all. But that wasn't really part of the project. But I felt very liberated afterwards for quite a long time actually. I had this very euphoric feeling. Yeah. But probably a toothbrush, I imagine.
If I could ask, so the medal that related to behaviors,
The what, sorry?
those medals that you created that were related to behavior, poor
Asbo
behavior,
medal.
was that in
Asbo.
any way related to A Clockwork Orange?
No. So you've lost me on the.
Oh, just the.
Are there medals in Clockwork Orange?
No, just the nature of behavior and
Oh,
misbehavior.
okay. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the kids converted them from being medals of dishonor into honor. The more ASBOs you had, the more street cred you had. I think they've stopped them now, partly because of that particular reason. I mean, Dean was like the first. He lived in Hartlepool in the north of England, and they printed a brochure of his face with all his misdemeanors as kind of. I don't know if that was a new Labour idea to try and shame young people, but.
Are you ever concerned that converting art into protest this way, the art piece becomes an end in itself? Is there an intention through some of these demonstrations to actually evoke or create real change?
Well, that's a very ambitious thing. I can't really say that.
If you could describe a little bit more about how that piece unfolded, the bin?
Yeah.
Did it ever fill up? And what was the process? Was there a process by which the audience contributed things to the bin?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, professional artists, I don't like to make all these categories, but, amateur artists, art students, it was open to everybody, but, you had to submit an image or something with some kind of explanation about what maybe motivated you to do it. Some people had stopped making art a number of years ago. They kind of locked their studio doors, but they didn't know what to do with these things they'd created. They'd stopped being artists, and but at the same time, they didn't know what to do with it. So people had various motivations. Do you know what I mean? Damien Hirst threw in a couple of skull paintings. They're probably worth £1 million or something at that point of time. And people had different reasons about why.
But over the course of the exhibition, did it fill to the top?
Oh yeah, it didn't fill to the brim. No, we've had to be in there a lot longer.
How long did it take?
But the idea wasn't for it really to. The idea is the idea. It's not really to fill. It wasn't to fill the bin. It was like I said to you, because I got the most criticism I got during Breakdown was the destruction of artworks, because obviously iconoclasm, and so I guess at some point I was going to address that again, because I hadn't really, because the whole thing to me was the whole thing. The art, I know an artwork is a different kind of possession to a VCR or to a Saab 900 car, but for me, I think for me, it had to be everything at that point in time.
Could you just tell me the date of that piece?
The art bin, 2010.
Thank you
I
very
also
much.
showed it I created another bin for the Yokohama Triennale in Japan as well. Yeah.
It's the row where we ask question here. If I heard well, your Christian sculpture or your critique of the Christianity was presented in Mexico, correct?
It's the end of my residency at the National Gallery, because at the end of the residency you have an exhibition in the National Gallery. They every 2 or 3 years. I don't paint, so.
Yeah.
I had to look at the collection in a different way. But yeah, I did. I showed it in Mexico City, maybe a couple of years afterwards.
I was just interested since, if there was any reaction about the kind of if you're strong Christian Catholic, there would be perhaps
There were one or two letters, but I was surprised how little there was. Because Christ has been persecuted by, so I was, but my intention wasn't to go out and hurt people's religion, that wasn't,
We have time for maybe one more question.
Michael, I have a question, and it's about as you emerge and progress as an artist, was your vision and voice ever challenged? And if so, how did you deal with it, and how did you
challenged?
react? How did you react to that?
In different ways, in various forms throughout my whole career, really. I guess what art bin, I was challenged quite a lot of times because I was present most of the time. People would come in and bring their artworks, and we would talk about their artworks, or people. I don't quite know how to answer that, but challenged in what respect?
I guess just as young people, we're all trying to find our voice in this world, and we bring a unique perspective to it. And as we're trying to make this change or impact or open up ways of communication, I think there's this pressure to perhaps understand everything or the end of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I don't think you have to I mean, I went to Goldsmiths, so our ethos of the college was very, you created your own course, so they treated you as an artist like from the off, really. And so you had tutorials with artists, who practicing artists, but it was kind of critical, yeah. But I think that just it comes in different forms, yeah. I mean, I look at the things and sometimes can't remember quite now how I got, I kind of paint this picture of how I got from one thing to another, but it didn't feel like that at the time. It didn't feel like that. And like I mentioned, I did have adverse kind of, especially about the artwork. People were very annoyed. I mean, I was going to get nominated for the Turner Prize, but I think because of the destruction of the artwork for Breakdown, but I was turned down because they didn't condone the idea of destruction of artwork.
Well, great. Thank you, Michael. Let's give him one last round of applause.